My friend pushed me to sign up for a dating app. It had been more than 6 months since my last relationship, and according to her, I urgently needed to get out, clear my head, and find someone new. I listened to her, but I approached the whole idea with skepticism. He was one of the first people to message me, a dark-haired guy with brown eyes. His name was Nate. His profile photo was very ordinary, him wearing a gray hoodie and jeans, standing in what looked like a parking lot, headlights glowing behind him. His bio had a couple of jokes, nothing special. Honestly, I would have swiped past him, but in his message, he wrote that I should remember him because we went to the same high school. He mentioned the school's name, our mascot, even the colors of our uniforms. Everything matched. I looked through his photos again, but his face didn't bring back any memories. I told him I didn't remember him. He didn't seem surprised. He said that was normal because I had always been the center of attention, while he was one of the guys who sat in the back row. We started chatting. The first few days felt completely innocent. He asked about my job, whether I still lived in town, if I remembered certain teachers. Still, something about it bothered me. He seemed to remember an unusual amount of very specific details about me. After about a week, he suggested meeting at a cafe downtown. I hesitated for a long time, but eventually agreed. That evening was cold. I arrived a little early and sat at a table by the window. The cafe smelled like sweet syrup and waffles. When he walked in, I recognized him only because I had already seen his photos. In person, he looked slightly older than in his pictures, with faint shadows under his eyes. He smiled, but the smile felt strained, almost forced. We talked for about half an hour. I kept trying to find some kind of school-related familiarity in his face, but nothing clicked. At one point, he started recalling very specific moments from high school, how I performed on stage in the auditorium, how I laughed at a joke near the lockers, how one time I spilled ketchup all over my uniform in the cafeteria. And then he mentioned how, back in school, I had once publicly read his love letter out loud, the one he had written and given to me. In that moment, everything fell into place. I remembered him, and I felt such intense shame and discomfort that I wanted the ground to swallow me. I remembered how someone had slipped a note with love confessions into my backpack. During lunch, I stood up on a chair and read it out loud, announcing the name of the person who wrote it. The entire cafeteria laughed. The boy who wrote the letter was teased for months afterward. They gave him a nickname, and every time he walked down the hallway, someone shouted it at him. I remember laughing along with everyone else. I remember telling my friends later that it was his own fault, that he shouldn't have been so dramatic. Nate was that boy. He told the story without directly accusing me of anything. He simply said that it was probably the most humiliating day of his life. Then he went quiet and looked at me in a way that made me uncomfortable. I wanted to disappear from embarrassment. I told him I was sorry, but he barely reacted. When we left the cafe, he offered to drive me home. After everything that had come up, I felt extremely uncomfortable and refused at first. But after he said he didn't hold any grudges and pointed out how far I lived and how cold it was outside, I agreed. My place really was far, about 20 miles away. About halfway through the drive, he said he needed to stop at a gas station. He pulled off the road, parked by a pump, turned off the engine, and got out of the car. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed him walking around the car, pulling his wallet out of his back pocket as he went. At that moment, something slipped out along with the wallet and fell onto the asphalt. He didn't notice and kept walking toward the store to pay for the gas. I opened the door and stepped out of the car. The night air was cold, and the sharp smell of gasoline hit my nose. The ground was covered in old fuel stains. I walked closer, bent down, and saw that it was a small photograph, worn with cracked edges, as if it had been carried in a wallet or pocket for a long time. I picked it up, looked closer, and fear froze my body. The photo was of me. It was old. I was much younger, maybe 16, but there was no doubt. It was definitely me. My eyes in the photo had been scratched out. Where my gaze should have been, there were 2 rough, white holes. I felt the sounds around me fade away. The hum of the road, the beeping of the gas pump, everything became muted. I turned the photo over. On the back, it said, "You will pay for that humiliation and for everything I went through because of you." I couldn't continue driving with him after that. A violent shiver ran through my entire body. He had been obsessed with this the whole time. I walked back to the car quickly, opened the door, and grabbed my bag from the passenger seat. My phone, wallet, and keys were all inside. Without fully closing the door, I walked fast along the side of the store toward the edge of the lot. When I heard the store doors chime behind me, I had already turned the corner of the building. I walked quickly down the sidewalk and turned onto a dimly lit street, constantly looking back until I was far enough away from the gas station. Only then did I take out my phone and call a taxi through an app. The taxi arrived within 5 minutes, and about 15 minutes later, I was home. When I got inside, I locked the door and fastened the chain. About half an hour later, a car pulled up in front of my house. It sat there with its engine running and headlights on for about 20 minutes, then drove away. I didn't have the courage to look out the window. Maybe it was him. I didn't sleep that night. I thought about going to the police. Then I thought about what I would even say. That some guy was carrying my old school photo with my eyes scratched out. That we met by mutual consent, and I just ran away from a gas station. I didn't know what to do next. I was terrified. More than anything, I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that he knew where I lived. My friend met his girlfriend online, and everything worked out perfectly for them. After hearing his story, I decided to try it too. I just never imagined how it would end. My name is Cade. I'm 17 years old. I live in a small, atmospheric college town called Missoula, Montana. On the very first day, I got a few matches, but Livy's profile stood out immediately. She was 18, tall, slim, beautiful, basically every guy's dream. I messaged her first, and was genuinely excited when she replied. We started talking. Livy asked what I did after school, which neighborhood I lived in, and whether I had any hobbies. At first, the conversation felt light and easy. Gradually, her questions became more specific. She wanted to know what my parents did for a living, how often they were home, whether I had any siblings. Then, the conversation shifted to my car. I mentioned that my parents had given me a car for my 17th birthday. She asked what kind it was, and asked me to send her a photo. After that, she said she loved going for night drives, and that it would be nice to go for a ride together sometime. At the time, it all felt like pure luck. Everything seemed to be falling into place so easily. A girl that beautiful was actually interested in me. I thought it was genuine. Only later did I realize those weren't casual questions. They were gathering information. The next day, she suggested meeting in person. She said she was tired of endless texting and preferred seeing people face to face. She chose the location herself, a parking lot near a park, about 15 minutes from my house. I knew that parking lot well. During the day, it was full of parents' cars, but in the evening, it was almost empty. She explained that she didn't like crowded malls and felt more comfortable in quiet places without people around. Considering her talk about loving night drives, it sounded reasonable. At 7 p.m., I told my parents I was going to a friend's house to work on a project, then headed out to meet Livy. I arrived 10 minutes early. The parking lot was nearly empty. A couple of cars were parked closer to the park entrance under bright lights. Farther back was a long stretch of asphalt lit by sparse, dim lamps. I drove around the lot a few times and parked near the edge. I left the engine running and rolled the window down. It was quiet, only distant road noise. I texted her that I was there and immediately got a reply saying she'd be there in just a few minutes. 10 minutes passed. She didn't show up. I messaged her again, asking if everything was okay. The message sent but stayed unread. The check marks didn't change. Moments later, I heard an engine approaching. The sound grew louder as a dark pickup truck pulled into the lot. Its headlights slammed into my windshield as it drove straight toward me. Almost immediately, I heard another engine from the opposite entrance. In my rearview mirror, I saw a sedan enter the lot. Its headlights briefly flooded my car with light. They pulled up at the same time, very close, blocking me in. The pickup's doors opened, and the interior light came on. I saw the silhouettes of at least 2 men. The sedan's doors opened as well. Through my slightly open window, I could clearly hear footsteps on the asphalt. Instinctively, I hit the door lock button and rolled the window up. One man walked up to my driver's side and leaned toward the glass. Another positioned himself by the rear door. A third stayed somewhere between the vehicles. Their faces were covered with surgical masks. Only their eyes were visible. The man in front of me made a short hand gesture, demanding that I lower the window. I froze in fear and didn't move. He knocked on the glass with his knuckles, signaling again for me to roll it down. I knew I had walked into a trap. Carefully, I reached for the gear shift and put the car into drive. The car jerked slightly. The man beside me noticed and slammed his fist into the window, trying to break it, but the glass held. I took my foot off the brake and hit the gas. The car surged forward. There was a dull impact as I crashed into the front of the pickup. Everything inside the car jolted. I threw it into reverse and hit the gas again, slamming into the sedan and pushing it back just enough. The tires screeched against the asphalt, slipping for a moment. The car spun, one side jumping onto the edge of the grass, the undercarriage scraping against the curb. Then, suddenly, a narrow opening toward the exit appeared. I shifted gears and floored it, shooting forward. I flew out of the parking lot without slowing down. Someone on the main road honked as I merged into traffic, but I didn't even turn my head. I kept driving until there were people around again and the streets were well lit. I pulled into the brightly lit parking lot of a supermarket, shut off the engine, and sat there for a while. Only then did I notice my hands were shaking. Once my breathing finally steadied, I grabbed my phone, unlocked it, and opened my chat with Livy. But the conversation was gone. Then I opened Tinder and saw that her profile had been deleted too. Later, I read online that criminals often create fake female profiles on dating apps, chat with guys, and lure them to quiet locations to rob them. I never thought I'd end up in a situation like that, and I definitely never thought I'd manage to react in time and get away. This happened last year, in the middle of summer. I matched with a guy on Tinder. His name was Neil. He seemed interesting. His profile had a few photos of him in what looked like a national park, with a dog. If he loves animals, he must be kind. I remember thinking that night. He was from Portland too, just like me. He was 27, 3 years older than I was. His bio said he worked in IT and liked documentary films. From the very first messages, our conversation flowed easily. We talked about work, hobbies, joked about how much we both hated Mondays. I caught myself feeling relieved, as if I had proven to myself that it really was possible to meet a normal person online. It made me feel a little less alone. After midnight, I wished him good night, placed my phone on the nightstand, watched the screen go dark, and fell asleep. The next morning, Neil texted me early. We talked almost all day. By the evening, the tone of his messages started to change. At first, I noticed he sounded more tense. He wrote that he was tired of superficial people, that all women were the same, that everyone only cared about money. He barely knew me, yet he spoke as if he had already put me in that category. I sat on the couch reading his messages, feeling like this interaction was heading nowhere and no longer made sense. I tried to joke, to change the subject, but he kept coming back to it again and again, as if he was trying to provoke me. Then he started asking for my Instagram and my phone number. I told him that after just a few days of chatting, I don't give out my number. My refusal didn't stop him at all. He pushed harder, got offended, and began sending me accusatory messages. After another passive-aggressive text, where he generalized all women and put words in my mouth that I never said, I blocked him. He couldn't message me anymore. I exhaled and decided that was the end of it. Just a strange guy from the internet, someone I had no obligation to keep talking to. A few days passed, work routine washed the whole thing away, and I forgot about it. Friday evening came, and I made plans with my friend Cassidy to meet at our favorite bar. We sat at a small high table against the wall and ordered a glass of wine each. At some point, a guy approached us and said something generic about how we looked bored and how he'd be happy to keep us company. He was a little drunk. Without much buildup, he told us we were very beautiful and definitely not like the others, his gaze lingering on me longer than on my friend. Then he leaned closer and said my name. I stared at him in shock. We hadn't introduced ourselves, and I had never told him my name. The next thing he said was, "What? You don't recognize me. I'm Neil. We talked on Tinder." That caught me completely off guard, especially since our online conversation had gone nowhere. I asked how he even knew where to find me, already suspecting I wouldn't like the answer. He didn't seem embarrassed at all. He said he had a rough idea of where I lived because I mentioned my neighborhood in our chats, and that I often went to a small, cozy bar on Fridays. Then he casually added that he had already checked 7 different bars before finding me. My friend and I exchanged looks. It was obvious something wasn't right with him. I felt scared. Goosebumps ran across my skin. When he said that we wouldn't be able to get rid of him that easily, I had no doubts left. He wasn't planning to leave. I felt Cassidy tense up beside me, even though she didn't know the full backstory. Almost at the same time, we both glanced toward the entrance, where 2 security guards in black shirts were sitting. Neil became even more intrusive, trying to grab my hand. He stayed right next to the table, as if blocking any chance for me to leave. My friend quietly stood up and walked over to security. After a brief conversation, she returned with the guards to our table. They politely asked him to leave. He refused. A scuffle broke out. They tried to restrain him, but he shoved one of them away and pulled out a knife. Waving it in front of him, he backed toward the exit, then suddenly turned and ran. A second later, he disappeared through the door. The bar went silent. Cassidy and I were frozen. When I finally snapped out of it, I felt the urge to drink. There was still some wine left in my glass. I thought it was over, but the night was already ruined. About an hour later, we decided to go home. By then, the bar was half empty. I paid, put the receipt in my wallet, and we headed toward the exit. Outside, the air was cold and damp. Only a few cars passed by on the street. We stood under the awning, waiting for our taxi, which for some reason was delayed. A minute later, the car pulled up. We recognized the logo on the windshield and saw the turn signal blink. We stepped out from under the awning and took a few steps along the sidewalk. And at that exact moment, someone suddenly rushed out from around the corner, where the dark wall of the bar turned into a narrow alley. I recognized him immediately. It was Neil. He ran up and grabbed my arm, yanking me backward and hitting Cassidy with his shoulder at the same time. He wasn't yelling, but the expression on his face was terrifying. He reeked of alcohol. I felt his fingers digging into my wrist. It hurt, and I was terrified. Cassidy screamed first. The bar door, which had just closed behind us, flew open again, and the security guards rushed out. Everything happened in fragments. One guard grabbed Neil by the shoulder. Another pulled him away from us. My legs gave out, and I stumbled, hitting my knee on the edge of the curb. A few seconds of struggle, a sharp movement, and he broke free. He ran back the way he came and disappeared into the dark alley. One of the guards chased him, but came back half a minute later, just shrugging. My hands were shaking. A scrape spread across my knee, a thin line of blood showing through my pants. Cassidy was holding her temple. He had clipped her when he shoved past. She was pale, but still standing. We were both okay, just shaken and scratched. He had attacked us again. An ambulance and the police arrived later. I didn't get home until around 1 in the morning. I still think about that night. I'm grateful that it ended without something worse happening. For a long time afterward, I lived with constant anxiety, always thinking he might come back. But thank God, almost a year has passed and he never did.